right, I think we're live. If anyone in the chat can hear me, just push 1. All right, got a confirmation from the chat. Thank you for the confirmation. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 469, Geopolitics. Please hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible, hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, those posted on the community tab. Document description beneath the video for you to follow along with. If you want to engage in discussion, there'll be a link in the chat for you to click upon. When you click on the link, make sure you raise your hand so that one of us can acknowledge you and then advance you to the panel. All right, let me get started. I don't waste too much more time. All right, first item on the docket is from the MiamiHerald.com. Haiti police and army square off in a gun battle on the first day of Carnival. I'm just going to let the video play real quick. All right, let me read the article. Let me expand this out. On the first day of Haiti's pre-Lenten Carnival celebration, the country's 2 armed forces squared off Sunday with off-duty members of Haiti's national police and their supporters exchanging gunfire for more than 2 hours with members of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse reconstituted army just steps away from the presidential palace in Port-au-Prince. The gun battle between cops, some of them in uniform and others hooded and dressed in civilian clothing, fighting alongside civilian protesters and members of the newly revived armed forces of Haiti, took place shortly after 1 p.m. on the Champ de Mars, the staging ground for Carnival festivities. By 8 p.m., the government announced that its national carnival planned for Sunday through Tuesday was officially canceled in order to avoid the planned bloodshed. The announcement came after an hour an hour after the president of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry for the North told the Miami Herald that he had taken a similar decision regarding Haitians Mardi Gras. A spokesman for the commission overseeing the festivities later insisted that the street party would go on, with gunshots replacing the masqueraders and musical acts who traditionally invite the population to throw caution to the wind and dance in abandonment. The public square in Port-au-Prince had quickly turned into a war zone littered with rocks, wounded people, and bullets. At least one person was killed in the capital when he was hit in the head with a bullet, local Radio Mega reported. At least 13 others were also wounded, including police officers, the radio said. Radio Television Carabes, a popular radio station on Rue Chavannes, also came under attack, with unknown individuals setting fire to at least 4 cars in front of the station, according to one of its morning hosts. I didn't know I was coming to battle, said a 24-year-old police officer who was wearing his uniform but did not want to give his name, and broke down in tears as he accused the army of opening fire on them and noted that several of his colleagues had been shot. The government already knew what they were prepared to do. They decided to assassinate us, but we aren't going to back down. This is a picture, very graphic picture. So the officer who joined the force 2 years ago said police had decided that they would do our own carnival after the government on Saturday failed to reinstate 5 fired officers involved in a unionization effort or meet their demands for a pay increase. In a press conference, acting Prime Minister Jean-Michel Le Pen said the government could not immediately raise officers' pay, which is between $200 and $255 a month before taxes, due to rules governing the salaries of public servants. Instead, Moise announced other measures. They include doubling a monthly police debit card from $51 to $102 for 15,000 members of the police force, the construction of a new police housing village with 2-bedroom apartments that would be sold with a mortgage payable over 25 to 30 years at 7.5% interest rate, and access to National Old Age Insurance Office, ONA, a government pension plan reserved for private sector employees. The government, Moise said, would provide officers with a preferential 12% interest rate on loans and pay half of it, with officers contributing the other 6%. But in order to take advantage of the loans, officers under ONA's rules, its director said, would need to buy insurance from the program. This is another graphic picture. Very scary shit, man. I'm not going to read all of this. I think the pictures speak for themselves. But what you have is a civil war. This is what it is. This is a civil war. You know, and it's unfortunate that Haitians don't have any real choice in this. You know, they don't have any sort of political power. I mean, the civilians I'm referring to, the civilians on the ground don't have any political power at all. They're basically pawns within the system. And you have the new military that nobody really knows where these people came from, firing on civilians. That doesn't happen. You know, well, I shouldn't say it doesn't happen. That should not happen under constitutional law. That should not happen. The military is not supposed to, you know, wage war on civilians. And the police did the right thing. The Haitian police took up arms against the military. That's a civil war. It's a civil war. And what's funny is that in the United States, they support the quote unquote rebels in Syria against Assad as the government, arming them and doing whatever. But when it comes to the Haitian civilians, all of a sudden now, they're bad people, and too bad for them. Crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And it's unfortunate, man, because Haiti could be Haiti could be the Dubai of the Caribbean if it had the right people in power. It would look no different than Abu Dhabi or Bahrain. It would be a literal paradise. It's unfortunate that you can't get the right people in power to actually do what's right for the people. A civil war is a civil war is the last thing that Haiti needs right now. All right, let me get you the next item on the docket. Let me go back for a second. Russia has been, somewhat vocal about its support for Haiti. It's done a little bit of things here and there last year, from a policy standpoint. Visa-free travel for Haitians from Haiti to Moscow. I think that's a good step. Venezuela under Chavez and then under Maduro has done immense things for Haiti from a policy perspective, and so has Cuba. I did read not too long ago that in Barbados, Jamaica and Barbados were having discussions about what's going on the ground in Haiti outside of the OAS. So it sounds like there's some power plays, or at least some thoughts being discussed about what to do with the situation on the ground in Haiti. I would have thought that the Haitians in Florida would be more organized, like a Haitian chamber of policy, to actually put pressure on what's going on the ground in Haiti, and actually put pressure on political representatives here in the U.S. To come to a resolution with things on the ground. All right, let me jump to this next item on the docket from taskandpurpose.com. The Pentagon lost track of $715 million in weapons and gear funneled to anti-ISIS allies in Syria. Imagine if that was Haiti. All right. The government failed to effectively account for nearly $715.8 million in weapons and equipment allocated to Syrian partners as part of the multinational counter-ISIS fight, according to a new report from the Defense Department Inspector General. The audit publicly released on Tuesday revealed that officials with Special Operations Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve did not maintain comprehensive list of all equipment purchased and received to equip Syrian allies in the anti-ISIS fight in fiscal years 2017 and 2018 due to a lack of central repository for accountability documentation. This is where blockchain comes in. In addition, officials with the 1st Theater Sustainment Command did not properly store or secure the relevant equipment in accordance with Pentagon guidelines so far that in at least one case, 1st TSC personnel stored weapons outside in metal shipping containers, exposing the equipment to harsh environment elements such as heat and humidity. The core focus of the report is the resulting equipment redundancies that arise from poor accounting without accurate accountability records, such as inventory records and hand receipts. um, joint joint task force personnel could order equipment that joint task force personnel already has in stock, risking unnecessary spending of CTEF funds and further overcrowding the BPC Kuwait warehouse, resulting in equipment being stored outside. Poorly maintaining gear or ordering duplicates is one thing. Maintaining custody of sensitive equipment, especially weapons, is another. Indeed, the DoD audit found that the lax standards for gear accountability left thousands of weapons and other gear vulnerable to loss of theft. While Military Times rightfully notes that the audit doesn't indicate that any of these weapons ended up in enemy hands, the audit suggests that the lack of clear accounting makes it impossible to determine what gear, if any, may have ended up where it doesn't belong. Without conducting consistent inventories and ensuring proper security for CTEF equipment, first TSC could not determine whether items were lost or stolen, which could delay an initiation of an investigation, according to the report. That is generally not great, but also deeply unsurprising. Indeed, a damning report from Amnesty International published in May 2017 suggested that the U.S. has already failed to track more than $1 billion in arms transfers to Iraq and Kuwaiti security forces as part of OIR, a lack of accountability that didn't stop the U.S. from requesting that $715.8 million in weapons and gear to equip Syrian forces. As Task and Purpose has previously reported, this lack of gear accountability among the U.S. forces and other foreign countries has only fueled the capabilities of non-state actors like ISIS. In August 2017, Iraqi security forces turned up in FGM-148 Javelin anti-tank missile and launcher while expelling militants from city of Tal the following month. An ISIS propaganda video showed a jihadi sniper rocking a U.S.-made 7.62 millimeter MK-14 enhanced battle rifle. This has been a problem since the beginning of the global war on terror. Indeed, a 2016 investigation into 14 years of Pentagon weapons contracts by nonprofit Action and Armed Violence revealed that of the nearly 1.5 million firearms that DoD provided to Afghan and Iraqi security forces, officials only had records for about 700,000 weapons. Those weapons can turn up when you least suspect them, and in the worst possible way, considering the deaths of 2 members of the 7th Special Forces Group in an insider attack in Afghanistan's Nangarhar province earlier this month. According to the New York Times, the Afghan soldier who killed them didn't use a Soviet-era Kalashnikov, but an M249 squad automatic weapon supplied by the United States. According to the Pentagon audit, Special Operations Joint Task Force and First TSC personnel agreed with the problems detailed by the DoD OIG and immediately initiated corrective actions to address the lack of accountability among U.S. military gear. The U.S. has no way of knowing which gear is ending up in the wrong hands. And this is where blockchain comes in, and this is why you see the United States is so resistant to blockchain. They don't like it. At least the government doesn't like that idea. The military doesn't like that idea. Okay? If you order duplicate items, then you can never be accountable for the other duplicates that go missing. You can just say, well, we don't know where it is. We never received it. So there's a variety of ways of how they can hide things, but when you have things like distributed ledger technology, all the serial numbers that get accrued go into a system in real time. Everybody knows what's going on. So you can never fudge it. This is why many countries, many governments are shaking in their boots about this. All right, move on to the next item on the docket. All right, this one is from the Aviation Geek Club. F-4 Phantom versus F-14 Tomcat. Naval aviator who flew both tells which one was the better fighter and which one was his favorite to fly. It's a picture of the F-14. In response to U.S. Navy requirements for high-altitude interceptor to defend carriers with long-range air-to-air missiles against attacking aircraft, McDonnell Aircraft Company delivered the F-4H, later redesignated F-4 Phantom II. Unique in that it carried no internal cannon, the F-4 relied on radar-guided missiles for offensive and required a RIO, radar intercept officer, to operate its advanced sensors and weapon systems. While the F-4 was serving as the Navy premier air superiority aircraft, advancements in Soviet long-range patrol and bomber aircraft dictated a requirement for a fleet defense fighter that could engage high-altitude bombers from well beyond its visual range. The iconic F-14 Tomcat was Grumman's answer. Equipped with long-range AIM 54 Phoenix air-to-air missiles, F-14s could engage multiple hostiles over 90 miles away, needing an interceptor's high speed while carrying this heavy ordnance. Grumman produced the highly effective variable sweep wing of the F-14, enabling it to operate at wide range of airspeeds. Interesting. This is an F-4. That's just an F-14, sorry. But which was really the better fighter, the Phantom or the Tomcat? I was privileged to have well over 1,000 flight hours in both fine fighters, says former U.S. naval aviator John Cheshire and Onquora. I truly enjoy both of them. Also, I obviously do happen to have an opinion on this. However, I am conflicted. One of the two was a better fighter, but I love to fly the other one even more. Of course, the comparison of the two fighters is a little troubling since they were different generations, with the F-14 being much more advanced technically. I had just completed 2 combat cruises to Southeast Asia flying F-4s and was now on shore duty, far away from the fighter community. I desperately wanted to get back. I wanted back in and wanted to fly the highly anticipated F-14 that was about to enter the fleet instead of going back to the F-4. And to my great excitement, I received orders back to the West Coast and San Diego to VF-1, which was on its very first operational cruise with new F-14 aircraft. While the F-14 was a fleet air defense fighter designed to intercept long-range enemy bombers, it was also promoted by Grumman Aircraft as an air superiority fighter, which to a great degree it was. However, as an air superiority fighter, it also carried a lot of baggage. For one, it was really too large to be a fighter. One of the guys in training said it had the same square footage as a tennis court. So we sometimes refer to it as flying tennis court when an air combat maneuvering flight did not go well against smaller adversaries like the A4, F5, and F-16. We also soon learned that F-14, as many military aircraft do, had some serious growing pains early on. On its first cruise, one aircraft was lost to sea due to a poor design of a fuel line and lack of engine containment. Of course, the major problem with the early A models was the infamous TF-30 fan engine that had a nasty habit of failing when needed the most. Nevertheless, the F-14 was a big jump over the F-4B that I flew with its highly advanced radar and missile systems, an internal gun, and a much tighter turning radius and a faster turning rate. While both were designed initially for fleet air defense, both turned out as very good fighter aircraft too. However, both were initially difficult to learn to fly in a dogfight scenario, and each one needed very specialized and different training to accentuate their strengths and avoid their faults in the air combat arena. So back to the question, which one was the better fighter jet? That would have to go to the later generation and more technically advanced F-14. As to which one was the better ACM dogfighter, that would also have to go to the F-14D with the later engine, and only if it were properly flown. If both aircraft were sitting on the flight line and I could fly against my alter ego in the other, I would pick the F-14 with the later engine and the D model in a dogfight over the F-4. But if I wanted to have more fun, I would pick my favorite fighter of all time, and that I will forever love above all others. I would pick the Fox 4 Phantom every time. And I might even win some engagements with it too against the F-14. That's a picture of the Tomcat. So, you know, I'm a big advocate for the F-14. I've always loved the Tomcat, man. As flawed as that plane was, I've always loved the Tomcat. Out of all U.S. fighter jets, I always thought that the Tomcat was just an amazing looking piece of equipment. You know, the swept wings and, you know, all of its armaments and stuff like that. Amazing, just an amazing piece of hardware. And you know what's interesting about this, that we're talking about the F-14, the Iranians actually have quite a few of them, but they don't have the parts for them, which is funny, because this was the early 70s that they received them, and by 1979 the revolution had happened, and so they had the early versions of the Tomcat. I think they had the A body. I don't think they ever got the D body. I think maybe they were supposed to. It was, what's interesting about this is that those Tomcats were supposed to be replaced by the F-15s. Okay. When the revolution happened, the F-15s that were supposed to go to, actually it was the F-16. The F-16s that were supposed to go to Iran that same year actually went to Israel. And Israel used those F-16s to actually bomb Saddam's Iraqi nuclear facility at that time, which was very interesting that they used those. It is a shame that the revolution happened so quickly that, you know, that Iran was not able to get the F-16s in time. Had they got those F-16s, it would be a different sort of perspective that, you know, that other countries would have had to deal with, especially Iraq at the time. You know, instead, you know, Iran is stuck with these F-14s that don't even work, or they work, but I wouldn't actually fly a mission in them at all if I was any of the Iranians. From what I've heard, they took down those F-14s down to like just a handful, and actually stripped the parts off the other ones. You know, it made the latest ones, you know, serviceable with them. So Very interesting stuff, though. I always knew that the F-14 was better than the F-4. I mean, that was kind of clear as day. But yeah, very interesting stuff. All right, let me jump to the next item on the docket. All right, this one from Popular Mechanics. Russia unveils Leica, its next-gen nuclear attack submarine. So I think we covered this last year, but this might be exposing more of what they had to offer. Russia is preparing to begin work on a brand new class of nuclear-powered attack submarine designed to compete with the best of NATO submarines. The new Leica class submarine, named after a breed of Siberian snow dog, is Moscow's first clean sheet nuclear attack sub in nearly 50 years. But we don't know how long it will take to develop the sub or how many the Russian Navy will eventually receive. The Russian Federation retains one of the largest submarine fleets in the world, including nuclear and conventional attack submarines, include guided missile submarines armed with cruise missiles and ballistic missile submarines armed with very long-range nuclear weapons. Although large, the fleet has a secret. Many of the ships are decades old and in need of replacement. One of the 16 nuclear-powered attack submarines in operation, almost all were built by the Soviet Union before the end of the Cold War. The submarine arm of the Russian Navy, like most of the Russian military, suffered for decades after the end of the Soviet Union. Only recently has the submarine force gained new ships, including new Borei-class ballistic missile submarines and Yazin-class guided missile submarines. Like the USSR, Russia considers submarines useful in rivalry with the West, as they could threaten U.S. aircraft carriers and threaten enemy shipping. The Leica class is the third post-Cold War submarine scheduled to enter production and will replace the Akula and Victor submarine class. According to Submarine Authority, H.I. Sutton, author of the Covert Shores website and contributor at Naval News, the Leica class will incorporate many new design features to allow Russia's attack submarine fleet to catch up to Western standards. The Leica class is being developed by the Militant Design Bureau in St. Petersburg, Russia. The submarines will displace 11,340 tons, making them considerably larger than the U.S. Navy's current Virginia-class submarines at 8,700 tons. Sutton reports the nuclear-powered submarine will have a top speed of 35 knots, or about the equivalent of 40 miles per hour on land. It will have a maximum drive capability of 1,698 feet. The maximum depth of the Virginia class is secret, but it's known to be at least 800 feet and possibly closer to 1,600 feet. That's pretty deep. The new submarine is in line with Russian submarines in having more of an organic look than many Western subs. While U.S. submarines have large conspicuous sails and a tubular, most pencil-like design, Russian submarines tend to have thicker, wider hulls and a lower, longer sail. As a result, Russian subs tend to look more like exotic sea creatures than the American, British, and French counterparts. The submarines have some catching up to do and will feature a conformal sonar array that wraps around the hull, provides sound detection in all directions. The submarine likely has about 8 533 millimeter torpedo tubes, the size standard used by navies worldwide, including the U.S. Navy. The torpedo tubes will launch heavyweight guided torpedoes for use against other submarines and surface ships. The submarines will also have up to 16 vertical launch missile silos for KH-35 anti-ship missiles and club land attack cruise missiles. Russia plans to replace its Agent Akula and Victor class submarines on more or less of a 1-1 basis, which means about a dozen Leica boats. That depends, however, on how trouble-free the development of this new class of submarines is and the health of the Russian economy. Moscow's Bore and Yazin class missile submarines each spent nearly 2 decades in development due not only to their complexity, but a lack of funds to complete production, too. While Russia's economy has since improved, a global economic downturn, Western sanctions over Moscow's assassination and campaign abroad, and annexation of the Crimea could threaten economic growth. Yeah, that could happen, you know. But we covered an article last year that talked about a new Russian submarine. It was top secret. I think it's this one right here, the Lakia class. This is supposed to have less sailors on it than traditional submarines. So I think most submarines have anywhere between 70, I think close to like 75 people on it for attack submarine. And then you have like the nuclear powered ones, you know, they're all like 100 plus sailors on it. This one is only supposed to have like 35 to my knowledge, which is very, very interesting. That means that they're using a lot of technology inside the inside the sub itself to replace humans, right? Artificial intelligence, machine learning. Russia is very, very strong in those areas. It doesn't surprise me that they would do something like this, because they have a aging navy. Most of their submariners are actually in their late 40s, early 50s. They don't have a very vibrant young naval force. And so because of that, it puts them in a bind where they have to rely on automation. Automation on a submarine, you don't need that many sailors. You can last a long time at sea. So their range is probably going to be pretty far, and their duration at sea is going to be pretty long too. So very interesting stuff. Doesn't surprise me that they're doing all of this though. It does look like a whale when first looked at. So, all right, let me jump to the next item on the docket. If I remember correctly, it was a black man that actually designed the torpedo coming out of slavery, which changed naval warfare as we know it for today. And he used the funds to actually, the money he made off of the design for the torpedoes actually bail other people out of slavery. Very interesting story. I wish I can remember his name right now. All right, let me get to the next item on the docket. All right, this is from ArmyRecognition.com. China has received the second regimental kit of S-400 air defense missile systems. As reported by TASS on January 27, 2020, Russia has completed the delivery of the second regimental set of anti-aircraft missile system S-400 Triumph to China by sea. The act of acceptance was signed last December in China. The delivery, let me explain this out. The delivery to China of the second regimental set of S-400 comprising the command post, 2 division of launchers, radar stations, power and auxiliary equipment, spare parts and tools has been completed. The customer also received more than 120 of the latest anti-aircraft guided missiles of 2 types. Since the signing of the document, the provision of the contract on 18-month warranty service of equipment by the Russian side has been enforced, the source told TASS. The source added that the second set of delivery to China by several vessels, the first transport went to China in July 2019. China has became the first foreign customer of the Russian S-400 Triumph system. The contract was signed for for delivery of 2 regimental kits. The first one was delivered in China in spring of 2018, then successfully tested in December of the same year. So the S-400 system is the most advanced surface-to-air missile system right now on the planet. Anybody who is somebody outside of the United States owns one of these. If they don't own this, they own the S-300. Turkey just received theirs a few months ago. We know that India has already purchased this. It should be in place by 2022. We know that Egypt has ordered a regimental kit as well. And then you start taking into consideration, Saudi Arabia is interested in S-400 missile system as well. You know, and it's also rumored that Cuba may potentially receive an S-400 missile system at some point. That happens, then you know it's game on. You know that something big is coming. You don't buy a missile system this advanced unless you anticipate something big is coming down the pike. So. All right. China is getting ready. They are no fools. All right. All right, this is from Bloomberg.com. Even without a case, Africa may be a big victim of the coronavirus. Even without a single confirmed case, sub-Saharan Africa may be a region hardest hit outside of Asia by the spread of a coronavirus. The outbreak has shut down entire swaths of the Chinese economy, threatened world economic growth, and curbing appetite for oil and metals that are the lifeline of many African nations. A slowdown in the #2 economy and a 5% dip in oil prices over 1 year could mean $4 billion in losses export revenue for sub-Saharan Africa, or the equivalent of 0.3% of its gross domestic product, more than any other continent outside of Asia, according to a study by the Overseas Development Institute. Many developing countries are increasingly dependent on China for trade, both for imports and exports. If you want to raise the quality of your growth that is more job intensive and more resilient to shocks, then you have got to diversify. I think that's what it's supposed to say instead of diversity. Diversify, and when you have a shock like this, it makes you realize that. The International Monetary Fund slashed its economic growth projection for Africa's top oil exporter, Nigeria, to 2% from 2.5% because of a decline in oil prices. The drop has led to pressure on the naira, even crude accounts for 90% of the West African nation's exports. Weaker demand from China also puts other resource-dependent economies such as Angola, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Zambia at risk. Crude prices are down about 11% this year. Copper and iron ore prices have declined 8% and 1.5% respectively. African central bankers are starting to sound alarm bells. It's a small catastrophe that is unfolding. Bank of Namibia Governor Mpambu Shimi told reporters after cutting interest rates on February 19th, we don't know what exactly, where, and when it's going to peak, but I think it's already starting to disrupt economic activities. The arid Southwest African country sells almost a fifth of its exports, mostly diamonds and copper, to China. The South African Reserve Bank will take into account the virus impact on the global economy at its next rate-setting meeting, said Chris Lowald, a member of its monetary policy committee. It's quite clear we have seen the copper price being affected. It's reduced, so that obviously affects our economy very directly. Zambian Central Bank Governor Danny Kaleyawa. The full extent of that is not calibrated at this point, but definitely has a negative effect. Unlike when the SARS epidemic started in China in 2003, the Chinese economy is now more integrated into the rest of the world, representing 18% of global GDP. Is just over a decade, the Asian nation has displaced the U.S. as Africa's single largest trade partner. A slump in Chinese consumer spending will hit smaller niche exports markets too. This will have an impact on other African countries who are actively trying to export more goods to China. Examples of what would be affected by a slowdown in China's food and beverage sector include Namibian beef, Rwandan coffee, Kenyan avocados, and South African citrus, she said. Still, Africa could bounce back quickly once the outbreak is brought under control, said Razia Khan, chief economist for Africa and Middle East with Standard Chartered Bank. As this does not have the normal characteristics of a global demand slowdown, there is little reason to believe that the traditional relationship between African growth and global growth will hold, Khan said, referring to Africa's usual sluggish response to a global upturn, this time with expectations of V-shaped recovery in China. That long lag may not be in place. So there are repercussions for, the spread of the virus. I have ordered several things from China that I won't receive until April because of the coronavirus outbreak, COVID-19. Everything is on hold. So it's February now, and I have to wait until April just to receive an item that I should usually receive in 1 day, or 1 week. This is how disastrous, this event is. For people.
Hold on, Mike.
Hey, what's going on, dude? Put some volume on your mic, man.
All right. Hold on, how it sound?
All right.
Yeah, all imports are slowed down. If you watch in the morning, if you watch CNBC or something like that, they'll be talking about coronavirus, and just watch all of the little ticker symbols. They show the graphs. They show a minus sign, a red minus sign. They show the trend lines going down. Dollar was listening in. Shout out to him. He knows what I'm talking about. So the coronavirus has a global impact. It is having a global impact.
Yeah. All right. This one is from BBC.com. Coronavirus in our African countries ready. When I touched down in Rwanda, I had somebody come up to me like this as well, and I had to submit a whole lot of information to him. I thought it was pretty silly. everybody's walking around with a mask on, but everybody's picking their nose. Ridiculous. The World Health Organization has already declared the coronavirus outbreak a global health emergency, largely because of the fears that poorer countries may not be able to cope with an outbreak. The main reason for this declaration is not what is happening in China, but what is happening in other countries. Our greatest concern is the potential for the virus to spread to countries with weaker health systems, said WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom, who is from Ethiopia. The health systems in many African countries are already struggling with the existing workload. So can they deal with another outbreak of a highly infectious disease? Michael Yao, WHO's head of emergency operations in Africa, notes that some of the countries on the continent have the minimum to start with. They are not starting from scratch. We know how fragile the health system is on the African continent, and these systems are already overwhelmed by many ongoing disease outbreaks. So for us, it is critical to detect earlier so that we can prevent the spread. What facilities are there at the moment? Until earlier this week, there were only 2 laboratories in Africa, one in Senegal and the other in South Africa, which had the reagents needed to test samples. They have been working as referral laboratories for countries around the region. One of the laboratories, Institute Pasteur Dakar in Senegal, has long been on the front line in medical innovation in Africa, including a yellow fever research. However, this week, Ghana, Madagascar, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone have announced they can also conduct tests. The WHO is also sending kits to 29 laboratories on the continent to ensure that they have the capacity to deal with the virus and also help test samples from other countries if needed. However, it's hoped that by later this month, at least 36 African countries will be equipped to carry out tests specific to the coronavirus. The ability of African nations to properly diagnose cases depends on how new reagents being made available from China and Europe, says Dr. Yao. The Nigerian Red Cross Society says it has placed 1 million volunteers on alert. Its Secretary General said the measure was to prevent the possible spread of the virus into the country and also contain the spiraling outbreak of Lassa fever across the country. And Tanzania Health Minister Ume Mwalimu announced that isolation centers in the north, east, and west of the country had been identified. Thermometers have been stockpiled and more than 2,000 health workers have been trained. Several countries, including Kenya, Ethiopia, Ivory Coast, Ghana, and Botswana, have dealt with suspected cases, replacing them in quarantine while tests were carried out. So far, all have tested negative for the virus. Uganda's health ministry confirmed it has quarantined more than 100 people who have arrived at Entebbe International Airport. Some of the people have been quarantined at 2 hospitals in Entebbe and Kampala, while others have been asked to stay in their homes. So how do you leverage technology, to help? If you're on a continent, what would you do from scratch, to curb something like this? When I got there, they did just like when I got to the airport, I had to spend like maybe 10 minutes at best going through screening to determine whether or not I had a coronavirus, even though I'm coming from the United States. I found that to be very hilarious. But most airports are like this. Even when I got back to the United States, they did the same exact thing, even though I didn't come from China. So they have a very poor way of trying to measure the coronavirus outbreak, any sort of infections. This is where blockchain comes in. This is where IoT comes in. This is where edge computing comes in. AI, machine learning, big data. My suggestion to most African countries is that anybody coming to the country, no matter where they're coming from, they should be fingerprinted. They should be logged into a system. There should be some kind of blockchain. There should be some kind of DNA swabbing, and they should be able to process this information with fast supercomputers or high performance computers, so that they get a result within a matter of hours. And they should identify exactly where these people stay or where they are, where they're going to stay, and if they leave, that it should also update the ledger, and it should test everybody for anything possible within the country.
Yeah, I think you're basically, this is something where, a continent, a continent like Africa could actually push some sort of global initiative to do just that. Because I think what you're looking at is, as I'm listening to you, I'm kind of thinking about how something like this works. And you're talking about, different blockchains that gather different data, right? It wouldn't be like, see, one singular type of universal system, that all nations are going to have to adopt to. But what if it's just like, a network of different type of blockchains that gather pertinent biometric data, where you last were, what airport you're coming into, you know what I'm saying? And so what it is, go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. But what I'm saying here is that you don't need different blockchains. You only need one blockchain, a public health blockchain, and all of that gets recorded into the ledger. All of it.
I think when you were talking about like, as far as like the travel aspects of it, I'm saying I was just kind of thinking of how you could kind of loosely gather that data and collect it for all individuals coming in and out, right? Because if you're trying to establish maybe like one proprietary blockchain, maybe you have to get, I don't know if you'd have to kind of get countries on board to standardize that blockchain.
No, it would be run by the AU. It wouldn't be the countries. It'd be run by the AU.
So it would be kind of like so that's kind of where I was going with it, right? Because then what you'd have is you have the nations kind of get together and they kind of form their own sort of organizational standards, right, on what that is. And so it's kind of like you have like these free travel zones, right? Because that blockchain data, right, is validated from country to country within these zones. And then if you make agreements with other zones, then yeah, I could see it. I could totally see it working. But just to speak to what you're saying though, like I don't think there's any other way you could address something like this other than blockchain and all the stuff that you talked about. You would have to use it to form some sort of solution or some sort of something that would actually work.
Right. And the thing is, the medical supply companies are making a killing off of this. All those thermometers, digital thermometers that have to be produced, they're being bought in bulk now. They can't keep up with demand. All these masks that have to be produced, there's not enough of them to go around, so they can charge you up the wazoo. And all of these, sterile gloves and stuff like that. Man, they're making a killing off of this stuff, man. The medical industry,
absolute killing, dude. Like if you go to Walmart or if you go to like Harbor Freight or something like that, dude, shit like rubber gloves and masks, like they're like $1, $2 more a pack just because of all this shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw a dude walking around with oven mittens on. Like, what are you doing?
Are you no, dude, you're bullshit.
Oh, man. People are paranoid. When I got to Kigali, it wasn't like that, but at the airport, it was definitely like that. Almost 2 out of 3 people were walking around with some form of mask. I thought that was kind of silly.
Bro, they're rocking masks on my job, yo.
It's kind of
like, yeah, it's kind of like, dude, all right, come on, man. Like, I think we're kind of just taking this a little bit too far. There's people who rock that shit at my job, dude. Yeah. Straight up. Surgical masks.
No, but they're right about African governments or states are not ready to deal with the onslaught of a possible outbreak like this.
Oh, hell no.
Because they don't have the physical infrastructure in place, nor do they have the digital transformation in place as a whole.
Dude, we see what happens when something like an Ebola hits, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've seen this already,
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. Ebola's a little bit different, right? Because it's you knew where it was, and so if you were the eastern part of if you were in Egypt, you didn't have to really worry too much about
it, right?
Yeah, you didn't have to worry about that. But if you were in the western part of Africa, yeah, you were screwed. But what I'm saying, from a technological standpoint, IoT is very critical in this area. Those digital thermometers need to record all that information.
All of it, dude. Yep.
Right, they need to record all that into a ledger, and then you talk about DNA swabbing. Everybody comes to that airport. They should have been swabbed. Are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah, what's it called, man? Dr. Phoenix can say the term really good. Pharmacogenomics, where you take like basically is non-invasive DNA profiles, where you do a swab right inside the cheek.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That stuff that's in my opinion, that should have already been done from day one, before, the outbreak even happened. They should have been swabbing everybody in their countries,
right,
to start building up a database.
Yeah, I was gonna say at the very least the people in your country.
Yeah, you should have been testing everybody. This is the problem I have with the United States and this whole HIV/AIDS epidemic, man. All the technology and all the infrastructure that they have, they can't even handle that. How is it the CDC is in Atlanta, but Atlanta has such a high concentration of this
Dude,
outbreak?
that's like the eighth wonder of the world right there. I've always wondered that shit.
My position has always been that test everybody. If you're not going to test everybody going into the jails. They should already been tested.
Let's start there.
Yeah, and everybody leaving those institutions should have been tested coming out. There's no way that these people should have been going in untested and coming out untested.
Yep.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Because you do that, man. Yeah, you can you could better isolate shit you could isolate it within like the prison population and stuff before it comes out of there.
Yeah, and then you start testing people at the colleges. It's up to the colleges to actually start testing people. I know there's some pushback about that, but I think that the colleges, they have massive outbreaks of STDs because it's a small population, 10, 20,000 students and faculty, but you still have these outbreaks on campus. Why aren't you testing everybody? That's my whole thing. Test everybody who comes in.
What about the retirement communities?
I don't think they're a high priority.
Dude, that was a joke.
Oh, you. I don't think they're a high priority. I don't think they take any of this into being a high priority. I think that with blockchain, and apps, public health apps, I should be able to, from a smartphone, I should be able to pull up a person's QR code and it says negative. If it doesn't say, it may not say positive, but it should say negative if it's negative. And if I pull up that person, that person shares their QR code with me, I pull it up and it says, her status says negative, my status says negative, we good. But
yeah, man, I think that's because I know you mentioned that before, man. It was like a hangout maybe like about 4 months ago or something. But you mentioned that type of thing, and I really think that would be something. You just exchange QR codes, right?
It's public health. How can it be? I mean, I know the pushback is HIPAA, that the information of a patient should be protected at all times, but you're talking about whether or not somebody has a life-threatening disease, man.
Right.
Are you telling me that we can go into, Trayvon Martin's history to determine whether or not he had marijuana in the system, but we can't determine if a person has HIV or coronavirus? Doesn't make sense.
Gonorrhea or some mess.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, man. Somebody is asleep at the wheel. Somebody's effed up there, man. There's a lot of pushback saying that patient health information should be protected, but every time we look up a Black person who gets killed by police, something like that, that person's information is never protected.
I mean, they tell you everything about the motherfucker, right?
Yeah, they tell you they got ingrown toenails, they got bunions,
everything, man. All dead and everything. They just tell you everything about your history, dude. But yeah, you can't get a simple QR code to see if a chick's been burned or not.
Yeah, man. That would determine. I mean, you don't have to know if they're positive, but I damn sure better know if they're negative. But somebody in the chat just said, you know, Emperor Augustus says can't test college students against their will. It would be a violation of the Constitution. But they violate the Constitution all the time. It doesn't make any sense.
When you say violation of the Constitution, you have to do that in air quotes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
Because you do realize that violations of the Constitution are subject to law, right? There's constitutional challenges all the time. There are constitutional amendments submitted all the time. People challenge the Constitution all the time.
The thing is, the CDC was talking about this maybe a year or so ago, maybe a couple years ago. They were talking about, you know, HIV transmissions through intravenous drug use.
Mhm.
And that's where I think Black women were supposedly seeing the fastest rate of, you know, new cases, something to that effect. And what happened here was people were arguing against the numbers, saying that, or the data to say that it's Black men giving it to them, but they actually found out it was actually the intravenous drug use, you know, the needle sharing, which was what was contributing to it.
Mhm.
And so needle sharing programs have been popular around the country because it's supposed to reduce the rate of transmission, because if everybody had their own individual needle, they wouldn't have to share.
They have that in LA and Frisco.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Needle sharing programs and stuff like that. You know, Clean Needle Initiative or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's stupid because, like I said, when the Black man gets killed or something like that by the police, you know everything about them, man. You know whether or not they had diabetes. You know whether or not they were, you know,
They previously transgressed the law.
R. Kelly had an STD or something like that. You know everything about these guys, but all of a sudden now, when it comes to this for testing, oh well, you know, we have Constitution. What was the Constitution for these other people? It's just really weird, man. Really weird. All right, let me jump to this next item on the docket from africascountry.com, Colonial Revisionism, German edition. The German parliament, the Bundestag, is rarely an exciting place and even less often the site of debate and protest. But in December, the far-right Alternative for Deutschland, AfD, managed to scandalize the German public by hosting an academic lecture on German colonialism. The speaker of the AfD invited has made a name for himself as a colonial revisionist in the most literal sense. Bruce Gilly, professor of political science at Portland State University, became the subject of the global debate in 2017 when the small but renowned journal Third World Quarterly published his essay, The Case for Colonialism, in it. Gili argued not only that colonialism was objectively beneficial, but also that it should be reconsidered as a model for governance for countries in the global South today.
Wasn't Macron just saying the same shit?
Yeah. Critics, while scandalizing the proposal itself, mainly focus on the question of how a paper that was blind to vast sections of colonial history contained major empirical shortfalls and was essentially the academic equivalent of a Trump tweet, clickbait with footnotes, made it through peer review. As it turned out, the paper has been rejected by the 3 peer reviewers, and the decision of editors to publish it without consulting the editorial board of Third World Quarterly led to the resignation of most members of the board in reaction to the article. None of this has stopped Gilly from continuing to promote his argument to reconsider colonial modes of governance for weak states, while at the same time complaining in the international press that his freedom of speech is under attack by left-wing ideologues. So what did Marcus Frauenmeier and Peter Bystrom, the two AFD parliamentarians who brought Gili into the Buddhist intend to achieve by inviting him to such a symbolical and politically relevant venue. Like his case for colonialism, Gili's speech to the AFD is an apology of colonialism based on spurious empirical evidence and a selective reading of the literature. But he also approvingly refers to revisionist colonial ideologues like Heinrich Schnee. Schnee was the last governor of German East Africa and a campaigner for the recovery of German colonies after they lost them in 1990. He joined the Nazi Party in 1933. Geely continues to downplay colonial violence by claiming its reactive nature and that it was an exception rather than at the very core of the colonial project. But the particularly brutal nature of the Herero genocide makes this stand out even more. Though not denying the actual events of the German war against the Herero Nama, he claims it is wrong to call this a genocide and lays the full blame on the German military commander, Lothar von Trotha, the author of the infamous elimination order against the Herero. Geely calls him a war traumatized outsider who committed a war crime and was condemned and recalled. Geely directly takes over the arguments of reactionary colonial revisionists in the Weimar Republic and transplants them into modern academic and public discussions of colonial history. Heinrich Schnee's phrase, the lie of a colonial guilt, says Geely is now an accurate description of virtually the entire academic industry writing on colonialism. He goes further, not only is academia lying about colonial guilt, but also, according to Geely, the whole project of anti-colonialism in interwar Germany, a minority position held mostly by the communist parties, parts of SPD membership in left liberal movements, but organized through the Communist International's League Against Imperialism based in Germany, led to a rejection of liberalism and cosmopolitanism and return to a German purity, exceptionalism, and separateness, which paved the way to Auschwitz. Geely's presentation fit well into the AFD's own efforts at writing an alternative history of Germany in the 20th century, one which rejects the guilt cult of the memory of the Holocaust, as well as of colonial violence and genocide. But it also tied to the AFD's stance on development aid and its extreme economic imperialism. Frauenmeier and Bystrom are the AFD's representative for development policy and foreign policy, respectively. Bystrom is a chairman in the Parliamentary Foreign Committee. Frauenmeier, a member of the Committee for Economic Cooperation and Development. Both have been mentioned in the Internal Secret Service reports on the far right, and both have contacts to right-wing extremists in Germany, such as German identitarian movement. Bystrom made headlines when, during the official trip to as an MP to South Africa, he met with members of Suidlanders, a white supremacist group that promotes the white genocide conspiracy among the international far right, and took part in a shooting training. Asked about the group by German TV, he called them an organization of South African civil society. Wow. Inviting Geely to the parliament to talk about the positive character of German colonialism is an obvious provocation in a time when pressure mounts on the German government to negotiate with Herero representatives on reparations and to take concrete measures in the area of provenance, research, and restitution of cultural artifacts and human remains stolen during colonial times. But it also points to the AFD's gradual efforts to develop a far-right profile in the areas of foreign policy and economic cooperation. And it points to an increasingly connected international far-right organizationally and ideologically. In an AFD motion to the Bundestag, submitted the same day as Geely's presentation, December 11, 2019, these connections became clearer. It demands the Bundestag declare that colonialism should be regarded in a nuanced way. This means taking account of the dark sides, which to the AFD only means the colonial wars in Tanzania and Namibia, but refusing any reparations and emphasizing the beneficial sides of the German colonial era in the public, in the dialogue with representatives of former colonies and in school curricula. The motion downplays the dark side by denying the systemic genocidal nature of the German war against the Herero resistance and claiming it was an outlier in what was otherwise a benevolent colonial rule. These are formulations reminiscent of both Geely's rhetoric and the Oxford Empire and Ethics Project, which was criticized critics as taking a balance sheet approach to imperialism. The AFD also denounces most of the academic colonial history, especially post and decolonial approaches, as being inspired by cultural Marxism, a conspiracy theory popular with the far right from the US and the UK alt-right groups to the European identitarian movement and terrorists such as Anders Breivik. I'm not going to read the rest of this. I think we get the point that Europeans want to subjugate more Black people if with every opportunity they get, and this is what's going on right now. Although I like German cars, I have no interest in their colonialism at all, and I worry that I know that Angela Merkel went to Africa last summer, with her trick bag there, and had some intentions on trying to woo African leaders. I don't know how successful it was, but it sounds like the white supremacists did not go away after 1945. It seems like they just went into retreat, and now they're back out. Their grandkids are out here again. The question is, what are Black people going to do about this? All right. Speaking of racism, this is from the BBC.com. Neo-Nazi Ronaldo Nazzaro running U.S. militant group, The Base, from Russia. I'm not sure if this dude is supposed to be Ben Affleck. Sorry. He's supposed to be Ben Affleck or Ryan Reynolds, but they all seem to look alike. The American founder of US-based militant neo-Nazi group, The Base, is directing the organization from Russia, a BBC investigation has found. Ronaldo Nazzaro, 46, who uses the aliases Norman Spear and Roman Wolf, left New York for St. Petersburg less than 2 years ago. The Base is a major counterterrorism focus for the FBI. 7 alleged members were charged this month with various offenses, including conspiracy to commit murder. Court documents prepared by the FBI describe The Base as a racially motivated violent extremist group that seeks to accelerate the downfall of the United States government, incite a war, and establish a white ethno-state. Okay, we just read an article about the AFD in Germany in their colonialist agenda, new colonialist agenda, and how they want to go about it and trying to rewrite history. And now you have this right here. The group, founded around July 2018, gains followers online, communicates using encrypted messaging applications, and encourages members to engage in parliamentary training, paramilitary training. The leader's real identity had long been a mystery. However, multiple images and videos of Nazaro taken over several years in both the USA and Russia shown the man to be the base founder, who goes by two aliases. He has previously used photographs of himself when promoting the group online. Last year, Nazaro was listed as a guest as a Russian at a Russian government security exhibition in Moscow, which focused on the demonstration of the results of state policy and achievements. A video posted online in March 2019 shows Nazaro in Russia wearing a T-shirt bearing an image of President Vladimir Putin, along with the words "Russia absolute power." We traced Nazaro and his Russian wife to an upmarket property in central St. Petersburg, purchased in her name in July 2018, the same month to which the FBI dates the creation of the base. Records show that before moving to Russia, Nazaro ran a company registered in New York that offered access to a network of security professionals with expertise in intelligence, counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, psychological operations. A website for the firm, Omega Solutions, once stated, "Our associates have worked with various government and military agencies, including multiple wartime deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan." When we visited the company's one-time address, it was a little more than a mail drop. Although the firm officially remains active and has a current insurance policy. Property records show that an apartment associated with Nazaro in New Jersey was given as the address for an entity called Base Global when it purchased land in the U.S. state of Washington. Nazaro married a Russian woman in Manhattan in 2012. She had moved to the city from her homeland 4 years earlier, and her CV says she spent time working in a bank. In 2018, when he first began promoting the base online using the Norman Spear pseudonym, they moved with their children to Russia. You already knocked her up, huh? In social media posts that year, Norman Spear posted imagery and videos by the outlawed British terrorist group National Action, praised Al Qaeda, and asked for volunteers possessing various skills, including with weapons and for his new organization. Audio recordings posted online capture Spear lecturing on subjects such as guerrilla warfare. He is variously described as a military veteran, a former CIA field officer, and a defense studies expert. Norman Spear was previously associated with an obscure movement that seeks a white homeland in the U.S. Pacific Northwest. Super Triz, where you at? Though, which includes the area where Base Global purchased land. Following the nationwide FBI arrest of alleged base members last week, and an online channel used by the group to post propaganda carried a defiant statement from Roman Wolf saying, "We will continue our struggle for survival undeterred." So, there's a global movement happening right now. There's a global movement happening right now, and people are sitting in the manosphere as if, this is, we can just flip more houses and open up more barbershops and we'll be good. Meanwhile, these guys are sitting around with NATO-based weapons and training on a regular basis. You can put all the Jerry curl in your hair you want to. You can lock your hair all you want to. You can stick your head in the sand all you want to. This is not going away, man. They're buying up land. They're buying up vehicles. We saw what happened in Virginia a few years ago when Heather Heyer, who was struck and killed by these yo-yos, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know what black people are doing today. Oh man, let me skip this, man. All right, this is from quartz.com. The Continental African Passport promised to roll out in 2020 can only improve mobility in Africa. It is still up in the air whether the African Union can keep its promise to deliver a continental passport by the end of the year. The travel document would allow visa-free travel between the union of 55 member countries. The potential economic impact is huge. Recent released data show that intra-African travel continues to lag the world. The continent's 1.2 billion people made far fewer intra-continental trips in total and per person than Europeans, Asians, and Americans. In addition, as Europeans and Asians increasingly travel to nearby countries in recent years, African figures remain mostly the same. Globally, intracontinental travel was a far more common practice than intercontinental travel. The amount, however, differs drastically from region to region. 65 trips in Europe crossed in another European country for every 100 Europeans in 2016. Just 4 trips for every 100 Africans were to other African countries. The data account for international travel by air, land, and water transportation from 2011 to 2016. Ettore Recchi, the lead researcher behind the project, attributed the case of traveling in certain regions to 3 factors: geographic proximity, economic prosperity, political integration. When political and administrative barriers to travel are removed, like in the European Union, it makes citizens more mobile. Africa lagged behind all of these dimensions, according to Recchi. Africa has been making improvements on political integration within the continent in recent years. Nigeria just announced that Africans traveling to the country do not need to apply for a visa beforehand. That means all Africans can now travel without a pre-trip visa to at least 53% of Africa's countries. That's up from 45% 4 years ago. U.S. nationals can travel to 65% of African countries visa-free. In 2016, the African Union promised to deliver a continental passport to help realize the dream of free visa-free travel for African citizens within their own continent by 2020. A number of prominent Africans, including some heads of states and diplomats, have been issued the passport. Through August 2019, 33 member states have signed the protocol to establish a Pan-African economic body, the first step towards the free movement of people. So I like this idea. I mean, it's a relatively good idea. This is akin to the United States, where you used to have a passport to travel around the country. Now, all you need is a driver's license. As long as you have a real ID, you can board a plane. So that's what's going on here. I wish they would adopt an e-passport, something that works with the blockchain, right? Imagine you put your biometric fingerprint or handprint onto a IoT-based system that automatically logs your identity, and it comes up almost instantaneously with edge computing. And you automatically get, you automatically board a flight or board a bus or something like that. That sort of stuff is game changing. right, jump to the next item on the docket. Got 2 more to go. All right, this is from NewYorkTimes.com. Russia exerts growing influence in Africa, worrying many in the West. The Kremlin is increasing arms sales and security packs and training programs, and the American Defense Secretary weighs withdrawing troops from the continent. Expand this out. Nearly 200 Russian mercenaries have deployed in recent months to Mozambique to combat a growing Islamic State offshoot there, even as Moscow is taking initial steps toward building a military port in the Horn of Africa that could become Russia's first permanent base on the continent. Russia is steadily expanding its military influence across Africa by increasing arms sales, security agreements, and training programs for unstable countries or autocratic leaders. Other recent actions by Moscow include quietly deploying mercenaries and political advisors to several countries, including Central African Republic. Hundreds of Russian fighters have arrived in Libya in recent months, but as part of a broad campaign by the Kremlin to intervene on behalf of the militia leader Khalifa Haftar to shape the outcome of Libya's civil war. American officials analyzing what they call great power competition say they are alarmed by Russia's growing influence, as well as China's, as Washington struggles to exert its economic and security goals on the continent. The campaign for influence is playing out as Defense Secretary Mark T. Esper is weighing the potential withdrawal of hundreds of forces from West Africa to better counter threats from Russia and China closer to their borders. But Mr. Esper review has drawn sharp criticism from influential congressional Republicans and Democrats who argue that cutting American forces in Africa would only help its rivals. A withdrawal from the continent would also certainly embolden both Russia and China. Senators Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, and Chris Coons, Democrat of Delaware, wrote to Mr. Esper this month. What a last name, Coons. There's a coon on the moon in June.
Plural.
Maybe he's a Gemini. Sustaining United States forces in Africa serves as a check against those rivals expanding their influence on the continent, the senator said. Florence Parly, the French defense minister, said met with Mr. Esper on Monday to press the Pentagon to continue its assistance, including aerial refueling and intelligence support to 4,500 French troops operating in West Africa against a resurgent mix of groups affiliated with both Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. General Stephen J. Townsend, the head of the military's Africa Command, or AFRICOM, is expected to face tough questioning on Thursday when he is scheduled to testify before Senate Armed Services Committee. Any drawdown of our troops would be short-sighted, could cripple AFRICOM's ability to execute its mission, and as a result, would harm national security. Senator James M. Inhofe of Oklahoma, the committee's chairman, said in a statement this month. As the Pentagon weighs its options, the Kremlin continues to press ahead on the continent. Ultimately, great power competition translates to the United States' attempt to leverage its weight as a military and economic superpower, albeit one that sometimes operates with bureaucratic sluggishness against the ability of China and Russia to send money, troops, and material with speed and little, if any, oversight. China has vastly increased its commercial investments in Africa in recent years, building factories and railroads, and it operates a major port in Djibouti. The Chinese military is also eyeing the construction of a new port in Senegal under the guise of assistance the Senegalese Navy, according to a United States military official. Russian officials are eyeing the port of Berbera as a location for their base on the coast of Somaliland, a self-declared state within Somalia on the Gulf of Aden. according to Defense Department officials. Both China and the United States, with military bases in Djibouti, share the same coastline as the potential Russian port. Russia has also expressed interest in building a naval logistics center in Eritrea. But it is unclear how far along those negotiations are, American officials said. About 1,500 miles south, down the eastern coast of Africa, Russian military transport planes landed last summer in Cabo Delgado province in northern Mozambique, and according to American officials, deployed about 160 personnel belonging to the Wagner Group, a Russian private military contractor. The Mozambique government hired the Russian mercenaries to help beleaguer local security forces combat an insurgency that claimed to be affiliated with the Islamic State. At least 7 Russian personnel have been killed in operations. American officials say, underscoring the risk facing troops for hire. Sergei Sukhankin, a fellow at the Jamestown Foundation in Washington who studies Russian mercenary missions in Africa, said the Wagner Group forces were ill-prepared to fight local jihadists. There's zero understanding of the local environment, Mr. Sukhankin said last month at a foundation conference. It's a different ballgame than fighting in Ukraine. Russia has sent troops, proxy forces like the Wagner Group, weapons and funding to Ukraine's southeastern provinces in a war with the Ukrainian military, a conflict that has entered the debate over President Trump's impeachment. The Kremlin has denied knowledge of any Russia-related military activities in Mozambique, but American officials say Moscow's motivation there extends beyond just a security contract. Russian military engagement and use of private military contractors in Mozambique is designed to increase Russian influence in southern Africa and to enable Russian access to Mozambique's natural resources, including natural gas, coal, and oil. Rear Admiral Heidi Berg, AFRICOM's director of intelligence, said in an interview at her headquarters in Stuttgart, Germany. The Russian military presence in Mozambique follows a growing pattern of Russia exerting influence in the security sphere across the continent. In the Central African Republic, where a Russian has been installed as the president's national security advisor, the government is selling mining rights for gold and diamonds at a fraction of the worth to hire trainers and buy arms from Moscow. 5 sub-Saharan African countries, Mali, Niger, Chad, Burkina Faso, and Mauritania, appealed to Moscow in 2018 to help their overtaxed militaries and security services combat the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. Russia, entrenched in Africa during the violent East-West rivalry during the Cold War, largely retreated from the continent after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. But in the past 3 years, Moscow has rekindled relations with Soviet-era clients like Mozambique and Angola and forged new ties with those other countries. So, yeah, I think it's a pretty badass picture too. Seeing that sister hold that rifle.
I know, right?
Pretty badass. Yeah,
That's a Kalashnikov, ain't it?
No, I don't know what kind of
No, look at that. Look in the background.
Yeah,
look in the background.
It's made by Kalashnikov, but I don't know what spec rifle it is.
Oh, okay, right.
It could be like a AK-14 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Point that I'm making here is that Russia is coming back to the continent. When I was over there was no talk in Rwanda about Russia being around. You didn't see too many white people around, to be quite honest. Most of the white people who were there, or the Europeans who were there, were going for safari. And so I think I sent those pictures before, that Land Cruiser that I had never seen before, like a bus, massive. But I didn't see any of this type of stuff over there. Although I did see the Rwandan military on full duty every single day. So point that I'm making here is that Africans are looking for, you know, they're looking for partners that are not going to judge them based on their political stances and their social awkwardness as well. The problem with the West is that they always have these preconditions, and the preconditions always seem to denote that they must, in order to get any sort of investment from the West, that they must, accept, pride flags and stuff like that. And that's not the business over there. They don't.
Well, the West, the West modus operandi always has colonial undertones. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, the underlying agenda here is to acquire your fucking country at the end of the day. Now, whether it takes 5, 10, 20, 50, or 75, 100 years, then so be it. We'll judge it based on, the political climate and, our ability to agitate it to speed up the process. But, nevertheless, there was always colonialism was always sort of like the underlying undertone when dealing with the West. I think with Russia is strictly business, and it's strictly business and infrastructure. I think that's what it is, and security as well.
Well, it's small first downs without actually getting sacked.
Yeah, I mean that's what I mean. We're not doing colonialism, right? Like we're doing business. What y'all need? Some guns?
You mean from Russia's perspective?
Yeah, you know what I mean. It's like what y'all need, guns. Like it's nothing big, right? Like what y'all need, tanks. You know what I'm saying? What y'all need? Y'all need some tech. That's kind of, they meter it, right? It's scaled. Their level of involvement. They're happy with whatever involvement you like. Whatever involvement you're comfortable with. So that's what it seems like with the Russians. It's like they're very accommodating.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the U.S., and I know this is the New York Times, but they make it seem as if it's bad if anybody else other than the U.S. is doing has any sort of presence over there. That only European colonialism is good. But that's what we read in the earlier article about the German AfD.
German, right.
That only their colonialism is good. That only they should be present when it comes to colonialism, and only they should benefit from it. But that's how Europeans think. That's the thought process. Not saying that you don't have you don't have a form of colonialism on the continent now. I'm saying that's their mindset, to go in there and to disrupt things through colonialism and make it beneficial for them and not for anybody else. But then they don't understand why Africans and Latin Americans move towards China and Russia. They don't understand that.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, man, because you have other global partners that can, if I pivot away from the United States and they're just their ass rape policies, and I go with a combination of Russian and Chinese partnerships, I can largely cover the losses of cutting ties with the United States, because Russia and China has made it to a level of global prominence where I can cover those bases if I decide to cut ties with you. I can make those deals across the board with those two nations,
Mm-hmm. Right. I know somebody in the chat that said, doesn't sound like they're doing business in Africa if it doesn't like they sound like they're doing business if Africa is giving away their mining rights. Well, we don't know the stipulations behind that.
You don't know if that's for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You don't know the details of that shit.
We don't understand the intricate details behind it, because the West only speaks from their perspective. And I'm only reading this because I think it's still a very relevant article. But the problem is, white people believe that melanated territories belong to them and them only, and that nobody else should have any sort of influence there. And what are they doing? Building up trains and railroads and infrastructure. What are they doing over there? And they would never do anything like that.
Well, also the other thing to just kind of address that comment. I mean, look, if I'm Russian, I go to a country and I say, hey, look, man, okay. Question, Mike. Why would a country need, was it an S-400 missile system?
Okay.
Why would they need something like that?
Mm-hmm. Well, to defend their airspace.
Okay, and from what exactly? Maybe people come in and maybe try to acquire their resources or something like that.
No, to bomb them, to protect your airspace.
Well, the suspect is to protect your airspace, but somebody who would be coming in to try to take over what you've got probably wants your resources, correct? And to a large extent.
Not necessarily. So in the case of Syria, they knocked out a lot of their water filtration systems and oil refineries and stuff like that. Had they had a sufficient air defense system, they'd be able to shoot down all of those unidentified flying objects, right?
S-400 may have been a bad example. Okay, let's use the picture that we were looking at there, the Kalashnikov rifles, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so on the ground, right? Now, maybe that is to protect resources, oil field perhaps, mines, stuff like that. And, if it's something to where a country like Russia is going to basically arm you, yeah, they may want some form of mineral rights in exchange for that. Because here's the thing, right? If I give you protection, then I need to find some value in something that's being protected, right? Mm-hmm. So there could be some sort of intrinsic trade-off, but that's what enables a country to protect itself. So you have to cut these deals and make these, you got to cut these deals. It's all about, though, what's ethical. Again, there's no connotations there of colonialism.
Yeah, colonialism is a very
it's very pervasive, dude. It's like basically you come in and you're
it's very hostile.
It's like okay, here's my country.
Yeah, you put up a fight for that, and it's usually pretty bloody, and that's why when the Europeans pulled out in the 70s and 80s, the 60s, 70s, and 80s, out from the continent. It was rejuvenating for Africans, but the thing is, Europeans are still sore about this. They are sore that they did not keep their tentacles inside the continent. And the fact that they think this way, from a human to human perspective, shows how vile they are when given the opportunity to act. That they will come in there and try to take you down. And so there's a necessity to go out and go buy some arms now, because at some point they're going to do something. We know that Germany and France, Macron was just talking about this 2 weeks ago, about this EU army. They need this EU army, and army is a land warfare branch of the military. I mean, what do you think they're going to use that army for? Do you think they're going to use it to do what? Sit around and do nothing? No, they're going to try to assert themselves back into Africa. And given the opportunity, this is what they will do. And they think that this is a good idea. I foresee that this is going to be a very nasty fight. I mean, the U.S. doesn't have AFRICOM for nothing. Africa Command. Who said that who said that Africa needed some kind of command for the United States? But that's the mindset of a European. There is no Russian equivalent to AFRICOM on the continent. There is no Chinese equivalent to AFRICOM on the continent. The Chinese have a base there, but that's the PLA Navy protecting their mercantile ships, not to totally subvert the continent. I know a lot of people want to say, the Chinese are just buying up everything. Why do you care? In the United States, the Chinese are buying up a whole lot of property here too, but that doesn't stop you from doing business here.
All over California, bro.
Yeah, they are buying up whole cities, buying up whole towns, buying up. They own most of the real estate.
Well, I was about to say whole real estate developments.
Yeah, when I hear people talk, man, I just think that, man, they sometimes people they don't read, man. They don't read at all. They don't really realize that the Chinese are all over the continent. When I was in Kigali, I didn't see any. I saw more Chinese women than I saw men, and those Chinese women were with black men. Okay, they were messing with black men. They weren't colonizing nothing. If anything, African men were colonizing that mouth. That's what they were doing. But that's a whole different story. You know, they don't have any problem with the Chinese having Chinatowns over the United States and major U.S. cities. You know, you don't see black people saying, well, oh, man, we can't be doing nothing here, man. The Chinese got all types of Chinatowns everywhere. They don't talk like that. You have people who have never been to the continent talking about the Chinese and colonizing the continent. But how do you know that? The Chinese, you know, like this guy's like Thanos. He just walks around, he consumes planets, he eats everything. He's 10 feet tall.
With a snap of the finger.
Yeah. He needs all of the stones. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Anyways, we get to this next article from South China Morning Post. U.S. must be ready for military clash with China. Pentagon official Chad I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. Esporgaya says, U.S. needs to develop weapons, boost ties with allies, and improve military efficiency to be ready against formidable China. This is a long-term process. We have to be agile, smart, said Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for China. The United States must prepare for a possible military conflict with China by developing new weapons, strengthening ties with allies, and improving the Pentagon's efficiency, a senior Trump administration official said on Thursday. The stakes of the challenge of conflict with China, in other words, are formidable, said Chad, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Defense for China. This is a long-term process. We have to be agile, smart. The People's Liberation Army is an increasingly formidable adversary that is marrying long-standing ambition with unprecedented new resources. The former U.S. Defense attaché in Beijing told the U.S. China Economic and Security Review Commission. This is allowing China and the PLA to expand the military's global presence, modernize its capabilities, and more effectively challenge U.S. national interests, he added. As China expands its ability to project force far beyond its shores, the Pentagon needs to build and deploy a more lethal, resilient joint force, including more hypersonic weapons, artificial intelligence, robots, and laser weapons. A second Defense Department priority is to strengthen alliances and attract new partners, he told the commission, which was set up by Congress in 2000 to evaluate the defensive implication of U.S.-China trade and economic ties. This pairing would give the U.S. a potential asymmetric advantage that Beijing could not easily match, given that many U.S. treaty partners' strong diplomatic ties and history of free and open borders and trade, he said. While the Pentagon has emphasized alliance building in Southeast Asia and the Pacific as part of its Indo-Pacific strategy, other Trump administration policies have irritated many long-standing European and Asian allies. Traditional partners have bridled over President Donald Trump's aggressive use of tariffs, his decision to withdraw from multilateral agreements, and his focus on America First policies. Esparglia declined to say whether the Pentagon was surprised by Manila's announcement this month that it would end the Philippines-U.S. visiting forces agreement. The island nation is strategically located in the South China Sea, a potential hotspot as Beijing ramps up its island building activities in the contested region. But Chad said Beijing's efforts to sway allies is no surprise. It's a competition, he said. We have to be very clear-eyed. These countries are coming under increasing pressure. Dennis Blair, a fellow with the Sassaquala Peace Foundation, a former admiral and ex-director of national intelligence, told the commission that Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte's view often run counter to those of his own military establishment. Duterte reportedly scratched the visiting forces agreement in retaliation for a canceled U.S. visa involving a personal ally. It throws grit into the gears of serious U.S. Philippines military cooperation, Blair said, but it doesn't eliminate it. Finally, Chad said, preparing for a more ambitious PLA requires the Pentagon to clean its own house. This includes improving American military strategy and performance, using the Defense Department's budget more efficiently and drawing more effectively on civilian innovation while safeguarding U.S. technology. In recent weeks, the administration has shocked the science community with the high-profile arrest of Harvard University chemistry department head for his China ties and by investigating top universities for failing to disclose links to Beijing and other countries. Science policy experts warn, however, that too many restrictions risk undermining collaboration and U.S. competitiveness. While China has an ambitious military blueprint, including more bases overseas, the unification of Taiwan with the mainland by force, if necessary, and closer overseas investment, trade and military linkage, and armed U.S.-China clash is hardly inevitable, the senior defense official said. Competition with China does not mean confrontation, nor must it lead to conflict. As Chad said, the PLA briefed U.S. Officials after releasing its 2019 defense white paper, and Washington hopes to maintain a constructive, stable, and results-oriented defense relationship with Beijing. With the coronavirus spreading globally amid some evidence that it has peaked, the PLA was drawn in early to help Beijing fight the epidemic that originated in Wuhan, Chad said. The Pentagon is watching how this deployment plays out for insights into PLA's ability to mobilize rapidly and respond to effectively overseas, he said. But the jury is still out on how well it has performed. The PLA is being brought in early often. Chad said, at the end of the day, this will make the PLA better or not. The PLA has around 2 million people in uniform, not counting paramilitary, armed police, Coast Guard, or reserve forces. Wow. Although it has been reduced, reducing that number to create more responsive force, this contingent compares with about 1.3 million people under U.S. active duty and another 800,000 on reserve. China's official military budget reached U.S. $177 billion in 2019, up from $28 billion in 1999. Although analysts say that figure excludes hidden funding. The budget increase has allowed the PLA to deploy an increasingly formidable array of ballistic and cruise missiles, fighter aircraft, and cyber and space technologies postured to deny the U.S. military access to Indo-Pacific theater if called upon. Beijing spending, the world's second highest after Washington, compares with a 2020 U.S. military budget of $748 billion. The Trump administration has called for a slight reduction in military funding next year to $740.5 billion as part of the budget deal with Congress. Christian Gunness, this is a really, really unnecessary long article by South China Post. China does as one-dimensional. If you're prepared, you'll win. If you're not, you'll lose. It's no longer steady state, but a continuum. So what does this mean overall? Because China is not going to slow down anytime soon. Although one thing I will say is that I'm surprised that with all of this, factory shutdowns and slowdowns and things like that coming out of China, I would have thought that North Korea, being as isolated as they are, one, would be insulated, but two, from the virus, but two, they would be able to ramp up production for themselves and actually become a new manufacturing capital. It's not that far from China. They have a lot of human capacity, and they're not affected by any of these outbreaks. They're very, very low. Actually, they have the lowest HIV rate in the world, and they have no real connection to the coronavirus. They are ripe for production. They could actually bring in a lot of money just doing this type of stuff. I'm surprised no one's really picked up on this. All right, let me get you the last item on the docket. All right, this is from Bloomberg.com. U.S. opposes Nigeria plan to hand looted funds to government. The U.S. is opposing plans by Nigeria's government to hand about $100 million the American authorities say was stolen by decreased former dictator Sani Abacha to a top ruling party official. The disagreement may hamper future cooperation between the two nations to recover state money moved offshore by Abacha, who Transparency International estimates may have looted as much as $5 billion during his 1993 to 1998 rule. A commitment by Nigeria to transfer the funds to Kebbi State governor appears to undermine Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari's pledge to quell rampant graft in Africa's top oil producer. The U.S. Department of Justice says Bagudu was involved in corruption with Abacha. The DOJ contends that the Nigerian government is hindering U.S. efforts to recover allegedly laundered money it says it traced to Bagudu. Buhari's administration says a 17-year-old agreement entitles Bagudu to the fund and prevents Nigeria from assisting the U.S., according to the recent filings from the District Court for the District of Columbia in Washington. This case illustrates how complex and contentious repatriating stolen assets to Nigeria can be. Instead of welcoming U.S. efforts, Nigeria's lawyers appear to be supporting the interests of one of the country's most powerful families. Neither Bagudu nor a spokesman for Attorney General Malami responded to requests for comment. A spokesman for Buhari said the settlement and litigation were matters for Malami. A spokesman for the DOJ declined to comment. Successive Nigerian governments have sought to recoup the money looted by Abacha, who died in office, and have so far repatriated more than $2 billion with the cooperation of the other countries, according to the U.S. court filing. In the case involving Bagudu, the U.S. in 2013 initiated a forfeiture action against a host of assets, including 4 investment portfolios held in London and trust for him and his family, according to the district court filings. So what this sounds like to me, I'm not going to read this whole thing. What it sounds like to me is that this is what this travel ban is about. U.S. wants their stuff back, and Africans are not playing ball with them, and this is the end result. Africans are saying, "Hey, this is our stuff now." So it's been over a decade. So all this stuff about well, Africans are getting colonized by the Chinese. It sounds to me like the Africans are throwing up the middle finger now. So yeah, man, that's what's been going on. And I see a different game being played here. You know, people are starting to choose their own sides. People are feeling more confident now. You know, Nigerians are like, hey, well, you know, there's millions of dollars on the table. Why should we give it back?
Mhm.
You got, you know, different countries working out deals with Moscow. Different countries, you know, opening up their you know, their business development for investment. If the U.S. isn't going to play ball, then let them not play ball. You got, you know, Europeans trying to rewrite history and engage in more colonialism and openly talk about this now. They're openly having these discussions. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if you can go into the manosphere, not the manosphere, but the in YouTube and find videos of Europeans and white nationalists having conversations about how do we colonize the Caribbean? How do we colonize Africa? How do we, you know, what are we going to do with communism? You know, all this crazy stuff that these ambitions that they have. But people would rather sit around here and try to debate us on the viability of Africa, but meanwhile everybody else is already there. Unbelievable.
I mean, that's the amazing part. I just, you know, for life of me, man, I won't understand it. I'll never understand it.
Nah, man, this is one of those things, man. People have all this fear, or at least the hashtaggers have all this fear. They got a lot of smoke for the continent, man, but no smoke for their own government. It's unbelievable, man. It's unbelievable. And the thing is, I don't know any Africans that are telling hashtaggers that you can't come to the continent. You can't do this. You can't do that.
I haven't heard that.
No.
I haven't heard that.
All the Africans I know, very respectful, very peaceful, and very welcoming to the continent.
Especially the ones that are a part of this collective over here. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's a different sort of perspective that I've received when I went over there, and even now when I get up every morning, I see my messages. People, you know, hit me up. Hey, Mike, man, you know, let me know when you're coming back. You know, like to chop up some game with you. So all this stuff about, you know, the Chinese man is Thanos. He walks around and he, you know, he has all these rhinestones on his glove, and you know, and you know, he walks around, he consumes plants, he eats things, he destroys everything that he sees and touches, and you know, he's 10 feet tall, the Chinaman. all this smoke for the continent, man. But and these same people still eat Chinese food though. Ain't that something, man? Little A-Fu Young ain't never hurt you. Crazy. Mufasa, shout out to Mufasa in the chat. He says, I think a lot of the people against Africa can't afford to get there, but they can afford to buy endless amounts of sneakers.
Yes, they can. Yes, they can.
They can afford to buy endless amounts of sneakers, man. All the money from their super chats, man, you would think they would use that to get a flight on the Emirates to get over there, but no.
Yes, you can. Yes, they can. It's really just a matter of whether this group of people we call it ADOS is going to come to terms that this is quickly becoming a globalized society, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of our domestic narratives that, you know, I would say that we've had time to address a lot of them, because a lot of them, these were things that like we personally could have done to change a lot of shit. There's a lot of things you could do literally right now today, but that is an entirely other subject. The fact of the matter is the world ain't waiting for your ass.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom line, world's not waiting for your ass.
No, man, Black people should have politically organized under the Obama administration. Should have been politically organized. They should have. I mean, I know we have the Congressional Black Caucus and we have the National Black Chamber of Commerce. I'm saying that there should have been broader political organization. They should have had an AAU set up, an African American Union that connected, that was collectivized all of their areas of activity that are necessary for advancement. They should have been focusing on tech. They should have been focusing on global economic outreach, or at least national economic outreach, funding startups, getting involved, holding quarterly town halls and stuff like that. There should have been broader organization under the Obama administration, and they did nothing. They sat there and they did nothing. 8 years, did nothing. They should have been.
We celebrated with the fact that we had a black president. That's what we did for 8 years.
Yeah, and they could have had broader outreach with the Caribbean. Could have had broader outreach with the continent. Could have had broader outreach with Latin America. See, a lot of people look at Belize and Honduras and think that that's not important. Those countries are populated with people who came out of slavery. Where do you think Lincoln and the past president sent those people to? Sent those other slaves to in the 1800s? Sent them down there. And so we have these conversations, man. Everybody got smoke for the continent. They got smoke for the Caribbean. You have a large, massive Black population outside of the United States in Latin America, double the size of that of an American. Got 80 to 100 million sitting right down here. We've had several subscribers go down to Colombia and say, basically it's like walking into Africa down there. I don't know, man. I don't know. And now we start to have these conversations about going to the continent. These same people are saying, well, the Chinese are over there. The Chinese are over there.
And
And the same guys who was saying that the Chinese men and Thanos have no problem eating boneless spare ribs, man. Boneless ribs and lo mein and lobster sauce.
dude, you do realize that boneless ribs is an oxymoron.
Well, according to them, it's not. They just eat it. But the point that I'm making here is that they have no problem consuming products from China, on offering up more Chinese goods, but then got a problem with Chinese being on the continent.
I know, right? Getting their Alibaba flip on.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All right, man, let me get out of here, man. Thank you all for joining us. Please hit the like button if you've not already done so. Share the video if possible. Hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust and those posted on the community tab. Doc in the description leaves the video for you to reference. I don't see anybody in the waiting room. So
Yeah, we out, man.
yeah, shalom.